Hello, hello, and welcome back to another episode of Happiness by Habit. I am your host, Silvana Pimentel, here to explore how we can craft joy one day at a time. Today, we'll be diving into a topic that is as important as it is empowering: overcoming domestic abuse and finding the courage to live fearlessly. And to guide us through this vital conversation is none other than Charlene Quint. Charlene is an award-winning, best-selling author, attorney, advocate, and an absolute powerhouse. She wrote Overcoming the Narcissist, Sociopath, and Psychopath and Other Domestic Abusers, a book that is being changing lives. She is also the founder of abusecare.org, co-chair of the Partnership for a Safer Lake County, and a certified domestic violence professional. Oh, did I mention she's also a domestic abuse survivor who turned her pain into a mission to help others thrive? Charlene, welcome to Happiness by Habit. I am beyond thrilled to have you here.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Wonderful. Let's start with this, Charlene. How do you manage to wear so many hats and still inspire people every day?
Well, they're all different parts of the same mission. So that's we wear the hats that we need to, right?
Exactly. Yes, absolutely. Let's go back to the beginning. You've overcome domestic abuse yourself and turned that experience into a mission to help others. Can you share a bit about your journey and how you found the strength to rise above it all?
Absolutely. And I think that's a common journey for many people who have overcome adversity, particularly domestic abuse. After you come to the other side, you realize that there's so many others in the same situation that you once were. And you feel compelled to help others. So I was in a long-term marriage, 20 years, and had 2 children. And I knew that it was difficult, but I just couldn't put my finger on it. And then it, like all domestic abuse does, it escalated to a point where it was just intolerable and it was happening every day. And so I didn't have much choice. I actually had sent my then husband, a very long letter and said, these are the abuse that is happening and has happened over the last 20 years. You need to go get counseling. And I had encouraged him to get counseling and prayed about it and had hoped that, he would change, but that never happened. And so it came to a time that I put an overnight bag and I put it in my car and I left and went into hiding for 2.5 years. And because I didn't want him to find me, and I didn't want my friends to know where I was, because I didn't want him to go to my friends and put them in jeopardy either. So for 2.5 years, I just tried to get out and get a divorce. And after I came through the other side, I was non-functional. And
My God, yeah.
I really was wondering, Lord, what do I do with this next journey of my life? And he put it on my heart, the Lord did, to bring me back into this ministry and to help other women. And that's when I started my own law firm to help women get out of domestic abuse. So as a family attorney, that's what I do, woman by woman, one by one. And then he also put it on my heart to write this book and to start this support groups and Bible studies and other things that I've started to help women come alongside them and help them out as well.
Yeah, that must be very hard experience because it's not easy to overcome such a difficult time, and especially to find the courage to talk about it, right? Because domestic abuse is something I think happens a lot in a lot of places, and people sometimes
absolutely.
are
More so than we think.
Here's
the statistics are they're shocking. Actually, we know that 35% of women will at some point in their life experience rape, stalking, or severe physical abuse, and 48% will experience coercive or emotional and verbal abuse. But that's nearly half the women in our society. And it doesn't matter if you're a woman of faith or you have a place of worship that you go to. It's across all segments of society. So there's a lot of it happening, and not a lot of people are talking about it. So it was difficult at first when I came out and started being an advocate for women, but it has gotten easier. And I realized that every time I've ever talked about it in public, it resonates with people in the audience, and they come up and they want to share their story or their mom's story or their sister's story or their daughter's story, whether they're a man or a woman. I mean, I've had men crying in the audience, sharing the story that they saw their mom go through with, domestic abuse, or their sister or their daughter. So it resonates with a lot of people.
Absolutely. You often talk about how helping women go from victim to victorious. What does that transformation look like? And where should someone start if they feel like trapped in an abuse situation?
Right. So I think when we start out, because I've helped so many women, I've seen the pattern, which is the same pattern that I went through. When you first try to get out or recognize that you're in abuse, you do feel like a victim. You feel helpless. But then the process that I have used is educating women, first of all. How do you recognize that you're in abuse? Because a lot of people don't even recognize they're in abuse. They know something's terribly wrong, and but they can't put their finger on it. And so I educate them about, what does abuse look like? What are the tactics that abusers use? What are the characteristics that abusers have? So the light bulb kind of goes off, and they realize this isn't just him being difficult or us disagreeing. This is an abusive situation, because a lot of people actually have grown up in dysfunctional families themselves, so they don't even recognize what healthy looks like. So we first start with recognizing what abuse looks like. And then we talk about removing yourself from that abuse, because you're not going to change the other person. They've chosen to be an abuser. Many women have stayed in these toxic relationships for years, if not decades. And if he has no interest in changing, and so you have to remove yourself from abuse. And then the final thing we do to go to victorious is recovering and discovering who you are and who you were meant to be. And part of that is recognizing the lies that we've believed about ourselves, maybe about God, about relationships, about the other person, and replacing those with the truth. A lot of people think, if I don't marry this guy, no one's going to love me. Well, that's a lie. Let's replace that with the truth. Right. These women, almost all of them are just the most wonderful women, and just lovely. And, when we replace those lies with truth, that's healing. And so they go from victim to victorious. And I call that the 3 R's of truth and the 3 R's of abuse. When you recognize, reject, and replace lies with truth, you can recognize, remove, and recover from abuse. And that's kind of the pathway to getting there.
That's beautiful, the 3 R's. Very, very good. So recognize, remove, and reject. Which one? Can you repeat that, please?
For the truth it's recognizing and rejecting and replacing lies with truth. And that allows you to recognize, remove, and recover from abuse. Yeah. So there's just a lot of things that it is. It's things that we think is true. But, for example, we think if he goes to counseling, that he'll change. If I just get him to counseling, if I just pray enough, if he just goes to, church enough, if he just does that. But the fact is that counseling doesn't work on on people that are abusive. They choose this. Counseling doesn't work on anybody that doesn't want to change. And these people
needs to be
don't want to change.
Right.
So that's, those are some of the lies that we believe that we need to change in our mind to help us heal and become the person we're designed to be.
Let's go deeper a little bit on those red flags. What are signs of abuse that people might overlook or dismiss?
Oh, great question. I think the most overlooked signs of abuse are the signs of emotional verbal abuse, which I kind of put in the same category, and financial abuse. Those are emotional verbal abuse happens in 100% of abusive relationships, because it's so easy to inflict, and it's also so easy to deny. For example, someone will call someone a horrible name or do something mean, and then when you feel hurt, because that's the normal reaction, they think, "Oh, I didn't say that. Oh, I was just kidding. You're too sensitive. You can't even take a joke," right? So look at that.
Putting it on the other person.
Blaming it on the other person. So first of all, you insult them or do something intentionally mean, right? And then that second thing they do is called gaslighting. When you deny that you've done it and then try to make the other person question their own perception. "Oh, I never said that. You got it wrong." Like, wait, no, I know what I hurt. I know what you did. I saw it. But then they will try to make you question your own sense of reality. And that's called gaslighting. Or they'll do something called projection, which is accusing you of the very thing that they are guilty of. Like, oh, you're the abusive one. You're the one. Again, I was just yesterday in a closing for one of my clients, and she was getting rid of an abusive husband, and he accused her of everything that he was doing, right? And this is very common, very common. So that's called projection, because they project their own darkness and ill will on other people. Of course, name calling and all of that stuff is in sabotaging. The other thing we can't put a finger on it, but I call it crazy talking in circles. Abusers don't want to resolve anything. They just want to win. So when you go around and around and you can never come to an agreement or come to a resolution, because they don't want resolution. They just want to win and bully their way through. So things never get resolved. The other type of abuse that we don't see, or that we don't often recognize, is financial abuse. And that happens in 99% of abusive relationships, because money's power, right? And abuse is about power and control. Abusers will use money to control their partner. And what does that look like? Well, oftentimes, when people get married or when they have a child, an abusive person will say, stay at home. I make plenty of money for us. Stay at home. You can redecorate the house, or, have time with the kids, or, you can travel with me when I go on trip, whatever. But that's the first step. The abusive person is thinking, wow, when she doesn't have any money, the other person. Yeah, right. She doesn't have any money, any income. She'll have no career. She'll have no way to get out when, things get rough, which they're definitely going to make them rough. And so that's the way to keep her there. So lots of people will be blindsided by that, thinking, oh, well, isn't that wonderful? I don't really need to work. I can, do the house and whatever. But then, later on, now she has to come to him and ask for money for the groceries, and she has to bring back receipts for the groceries, so she can't spend anything. And maybe he'll put her on an allowance, or she's got to show what she spent it on. And now he's not going to give her money for gas, because then she's independent and she's going to go places. And so that's just the first step of keeping her out of the having no money of her own. And then, oftentimes she won't be on a credit card, or they won't have any joint assets. She won't have any access to joint funds or investments or what have you. So that's another way, if she ever had to leave, keeping her away. She has to go, begging her family or somebody to help her out so that she can get away from this. So those are two of the most common ways that people don't really recognize. And of course, then there's physical abuse, which most people recognize. If you're hitting someone, that's abusive. But there's other ways of abuse that we don't recognize. Drops someone off at kicks them out of the car. Well, you don't get a bruise, but that's a very common way that abusers intimidate their partners. And she's left trying to figure out a way home out in the middle of nowhere. So,
wow.
Yeah. So
Interesting.
I just want to say one more common form of abuse that we don't even think about is spiritual abuse, right? So if you're a woman of faith, and I say that woman because 90% of abusers are men statistically. Not that there aren't some women that are abusive, but by and large it's men. He will misquote the scriptures, whatever her holy book is, whether it's the Bible, the Quran, or what have you, and say, God says this, and you have to, so he will twist the scriptures to justify his abuse and keep her there. And he may even have a pastor or imam that would support him in that. And so she thinks, oh, wow, I would really make God mad. And if she's a woman of faith and that's important to her, we know that women of faith stay in abusive marriages statistically longer than women without faith. So those are just some of the forms.
Interesting. And then living an abusive situation can be terrifying. What advice do you have for someone who wants to leave but feels paralyzed by fear, whether that's fear of unknown, financial, or even retaliation?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. It is terrifying because it is the big unknown. Well, as I said, I'm a woman of faith. So for me, I tried to focus on the promises of God. And I tell women this all the time. I said, living an abuser is like the Israelites in the Exodus, right? We know the story of Moses and the Israelites going to the promised land. God didn't change Pharaoh's heart, right? He was still a horrible person that was using the Israelites as slaves. But what he did do is give them the strength and the courage to leave and promise them a land of rest and peace. And so when we remember those promises, it does give us courage, and he will send us a Moses to help us through the desert and get to the other side. There's usually more help than you think there is. There's people, there's organizations, there's almost every county in the U.S. has a domestic abuse organization that can help her through that.
Speaking about organizations, let's talk about abusecare.org. Has faith-based approach. How does faith play a role in the healing process for survivors of domestic abuse? And let's talk, this is your organization. Let's talk about your organization.
Yeah. So I thank you for asking. I founded Abuse Care because there's so many women of faith that are having a hard time finding hope and healing as they try to figure out what to do, what they're in this situation. What, practically speaking, I offer one-on-one coaching and Bible studies and support groups, which are national now because we have the option of Zoom. And so it's nice to have people joining us from all over the place. And I also focus on teaching pastors and churches and leaders in the church on how do you support a victim of abuse if they're in your congregation, and how do you keep the abuser accountable, because sometimes that same abuser is in their congregation. What do you do about that? But I think faith plays a huge role in healing because, God is the great healer. And when we recognize the truths that we are made in his image, that we are worthy of respect and worthy of love, and that he doesn't want us to live in these abusive marriages and situations, and that he wants the best for us, he wants an abundant life. When we get those truths down into our soul, and it changes how we think, and we know that we are victors because we have the God of the universe on our side, and us and him as a majority. It changes our whole outlook, and it changes how we heal, and it can put our healing on the fast track when we truly accept those truths into our lives.
Right. Speaking of that, you have turned what could have been a lifelong struggle into a mission of hope and healing. So something really sad or difficult or horrible that happened to you, you channel your pain into a beautiful thing, into a purpose, and you're helping a lot of people like that. What keeps you motivated to continue this work?
Again, I turn back to my faith. I know that God called me to do this work because I would never have chosen it myself. I would not. This is just a really difficult thing to do every day, but I know that he's called me to do this work, and he's called me to help women get out of these situations and to help give hope and healing. So, he's my motivation. I also have in my office, I have the Army Warrior. So you have to switch mindsets from being, poor me, I'm a victim of this, to no, I'm a victor, I'm a warrior, I'm doing this, and I'm going to fight for other women. And so the Army Warrior ethos that I have in there is, one, I will always place the mission first. I will never accept defeat. I will never quit. And I will never leave a fallen comrade. And so those are the four. That's the ethos that I go by when I'm representing a woman in court, trying to get her out of an abusive situation. And believe me, they're often crazy with the other side and the other side's attorney doing as much as they can to damage and destroy. But I just keep fighting, and I never leave a fallen comrade. That's my sister. That I'm getting out.
I love that. And you have helped through your organization, through your practice, and through your book, a lot of people. Let's talk about your book. What inspired you to write it, and what message do you hope readers take away from it?
Thank you for asking. Yes, my book is a 600-page comprehensive handbook for a woman escaping abuse. I think the inspiration, again, I felt called to write it because, again, I'm a woman of faith, and I try to listen to the call when God is nudging me in a certain direction. But when I was going through it, there was not one book that gave me everything I needed to know. There's, one book that says a little bit about this, and one book says a little bit about this. There's very few books on how to heal. There's very few books on how do you literally get out of this situation. What's the step-by-step process you need to do? What's the spiritual battle plan that you have? What's the legal plan you need to have? What's the emotional support plan? I couldn't find any of those books. And those are all the things that you need. So the idea was to give a woman in one place everything she needs to know on how to recognize abuse and abusers, and recognize if she's in abuse, this is what it looks like, to get some practical plans on how to help her out of abuse, and help her children as well, because abusers will always use children and turn them against their mom and the rest of the world. I mean, there's some things that you can absolutely go to the bank on what they do when you leave. And parental alienation is one. They'll try to turn the kids against the mom and lie about her. They'll try to turn her whole network and socially isolate her, so that, the people that she had thought were friends or church members or family members, he just lies and turns them against her. He will definitely hide assets. That's a given, and lie about assets. He'll drag on the litigation, and then he will turn into this. He will play the pity party and play the victim. My wife left me and I didn't do anything wrong. I'm just this wonderful person and she left and it's all her fault. And, they play this whole song and dance routine. And if they are, if people don't really know what to look for, they believe him. It's very difficult when you leave, because it's very isolating, and your children are mad at you because their dad has told lies about you to them, and so it's a very difficult time leaving. So you need to know how to get out of these and know what to expect, and have your spiritual weapons as well as your legal and financial game plan in place. And then how do you heal? What are the lies that we believe that got us into this mess? And what are the lies we believe that kept us in this mess, for years, if not decades? And what are the lies that are keeping us from healing? So I weave all of the truth. Here's the lie. Here's the truth. Here's the lie. Here's the truth. And so many people are like, oh, you're speaking directly to me. I hear that from so many women. And then how do you become the woman that you are designed to be? How do you get you back? How do you reestablish a mission in life? Because God's given each of us a mission while we are here on this planet. And so many women are just, they're tossed at sea, not knowing where to go and no direction. And especially after you get out of one of these difficult situations, you're just almost, I was non-functional. I know many other people are too. So, and it helps with the healing process. These are the techniques for healing and getting to know each person's purpose. So a lot of women, I get feedback all the time, which I love. It's like, wow, this is exactly my situation. Or this is, you're speaking, those exact words are what my husband used. I'm like, yep, that's exactly right.
Wow. It must be very fulfilling for you to be able to help so many people, Charlene. That's a beautiful purpose you have in life.
It is. And it's, that's one of those things that keeps me going. This is really making a difference in somebody else's life. And so, and that's going to make a difference in the next generation's life, and so on and so forth. Because, domestic abuse, like any kind of abuse, it continues from generation to generation, because children learn it from their parents. That's who their role models are. And so we know that children of abuse, with the boys, are 10 times more likely to be an abuser themselves, and girls raised in abuse are 6 times more likely to choose an abuser as a spouse. And so it really goes down from generation to generation until someone stands up and says, it stops with me. My kids are not going to see this. I'm going to break this chain. And that's what I'm hoping.
Wow, absolutely. I think mission accomplished for sure. And you, not only your family, but everybody else around you, you made a beautiful mission of your life in all the ways to support people who are being abused. That's a beautiful purpose. Again, for those listening today who might be dealing with abuse, or who know somebody who is, what's the one piece of advice you would give them to leave them with?
You are stronger than you think. And there is peace and rest and healing on the other side.
I love that. That's a beautiful one, Charlene. Thank you. Well, the name of this podcast is Happiness by Habit. Are there any happy habits you would like to share with us that you use in your daily life?
Well, I have a lot of them, actually.
Tell us a few.
Yeah. So I start each morning with coffee, of course, coffee and a time of meditation or prayer or journaling. And so I just want to start each day, because I know as soon as my feet hit the ground, there's going to be, particularly with the people that are trying to, that they have me as their attorney trying to get rid of crazy on the other side. So I start being centered with so I start my day like that. And then at the end of the day, I do a lot of self-care because of what I do, and it's so difficult. I try to make sure that I have some downtime in the evening. I have a wonderful husband now, and we talk. We both work from home, so it's nice to have that interaction. And so, we talk and we kind of calm down in the evenings after our busy lives during the day and the meetings at the evening, and just have a little, reconnection time and downtime. Music is a great thing that lifts us up. So I have positive music playing at all the times, and then I leave
here or to dance.
Yes, I do. I get up and dance sometimes just to, because that's a spiritual warfare, actually. The music is just, you get the positive energy out and get the negative energy to leave. And I just leave some space so that not every minute is filled with something, so that if someone calls me in an emergency, I can say, yes, I'm going to help that person, and just drop everything and do that. So those are my I do.
Love it. Love them. Lastly, Charlene, how can people connect with you to learn more about your work or get support through abusecare.org or other initiatives?
Yes, well, you can reach me on Facebook. I have an author page. I actually have a book page for Overcoming the Narcissist, Sociopath, the Psychopath, and other domestic abusers. It has its own Facebook page. You can connect with me at Abuse Care. The book is available on Amazon, and I have a workbook coming up for support groups. So if you're interested in your own workbook as you work through this, or want to do it with a faith-based organization or your church or whatever you want to do, there's, I've been doing that. I've been running support groups for 10 years now. And so I came up with my own curriculum because there was no other curriculum out there. When I started, there was nothing. And we need a curriculum for support groups. So that's coming out this year. So, but you can if you go onto abusecare.org, you'll have all my contact information, and you can drop me an email or give me a call on the phone. I get calls and emails from people all over the country, and in fact, all over the world sometimes. So happy to connect.
Wonderful. And we'll make sure to put your social media sites here on the podcast as well. Thank you so much. It was really, really beautiful to spend time with you and to learn more about all the beautiful things you do. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and your heart with us today, Charlene. And
thank you for having me.
Yes, Charlene. If you listening, remember you are as stronger as you think, and there is help and hope waiting for you. If Charlene's story has touched your heart, or if you know somebody or you need support, please check out abusecare.org and Charlene's book. Thank you for joining us on Happiness by Habit. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and share this episode with someone who might need it. Together, we can create a world filled with hope, healing, and happiness. Take care. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.